So now we're going to move into a panel session, again with the focus this time on really along challenges along the way in a career in clinician science. We've got 4 fantastic panelists. We've got lots of questions for them. And maybe they can come up as I introduce them. The first is Associate Professor Justin Skowno. Justin's a full-time clinician researcher at the Children's Hospital at Westmead. He's the Director of Research in the Department of Paediatric Anaesthesia and is an Associate Professor at the University of Sydney. His research interests include cerebral monitoring using optical, electrical and other modalities, the neurodevelopmental impacts of anaesthesia, and data science applications in anaesthesia and critical care. Next we've got Noemi Fuentes-Bolanos, who's a paediatric oncologist and clinical cancer geneticist at Kids Cancer Centre. Noemi is originally from Spain. Her primary research interest is in cancer genetic risk in children, adolescents and young adults and the implications for diagnosis and management of childhood cancers. The current role focuses on integrative analysis and interpretation of somatic and germline findings in childhood cancer and translating these findings into meaningful clinical recommendations. And she does it. Thirdly, we have Professor Natasha Rogers. Natasha's head of the Transplantation head of the kidney injury at Westmead Institute. Professor Rogers is a senior staff specialist at Westmead Hospital. She's Professor of Nephrology and Transplantation Medicine at the University of Sydney, and where she's also an NHMRC Emerging Leader Fellow, and is Deputy Director of the Centre for Transplant and Renal Research at the Westmead Institute. She runs a kidney injury group, which focuses on molecular mechanisms of acute and chronic kidney injury, as well as translation findings into clinical practice. And her team performed the first machine perfusion-treated kidney transplant in Australia in 2021, and she currently leads a multi-center island transplant trial that uses novel immunosuppression. And finally, Dr. Carlos Garcia-Esperon. Carlos, come on down. Carlos is Director of the Hunter Stroke Service at the John Hunter Hospital. He's a stroke neurologist, an early career researcher, and he undertook his clinical training in neurology in Spain and in Switzerland, followed by a stroke fellowship at the John Hunter Hospital. He completed his PhD at the University of Newcastle in the field of brain perfusion imaging in acute stroke. And he's been awarded several research grants to support his work in the implementation of brain perfusion imaging in acute stroke treatment in early stroke cancer. You'll agree this is a diverse and really interesting and welcome panel. So, this is about challenges in your career, right? I'm sure you've got lots of questions for the panel. Please just perhaps put your hand up. We've got some online questions as well, right? Maybe we can just start off with a really simple one. When did you do PhD? What stage did you do that? What are your reflections on whether that was a good time or not?
Mic'd up here, is that okay? So I started later. I qualified in medicine in 1996 and it took me until 2011 to get around to PhD. It had been bubbling around inside my head, and 2011 to 18 PhD years with a child.
So yours 5 with child rearing?
Yeah.
That's tough.
For my job.
Actually, my PhD too. So I finished the university and then started my training in pediatrics, and then at the same time I was a registrar and then an advanced trainee. I was doing my PhD in parallel. I was learning a lot. It was really, I wouldn't change it, but I think it took me longer than it would have taken me if I would have more experience in research before I did my PhD. That's why probably I think it was a little bit too early. Mainly because you have to go through all of the hurdles that you have to when you are doing your PhD, your training. I think it's a little bit maybe choosing the hard path.
So I finished my nephrology training and then started the PhD. But I certainly have colleagues who've done every permutation and every combination.
Do you have a sense for what works best?
Tickets, like whatever you fit it into, depending on your stage of life and what you want to do. And also the type of PhD, because the big is quite different if you want to do clinical research versus what that stuff.
So you come.
I've done my PhD 4 years after finishing my clinical training in neurology. I think that in my case, that was at the right time of finding kind of the right team to do it. As I was working in Spain by then, that was my place at that point. Switzerland, for many reasons, wasn't probably the right team to do a PhD, and I came here to Australia. Kind of everything has worked very well. Just finding the right team.
How many in the audience have actually finished it yet? How many are doing it? Yeah. Questions from the audience?
Hey, so as reputable clinician scientists, what I was kind of curious about was at one point, it sounds like you did all your PhDs in varying degrees. At what point did you decide, hey, I'm gonna, do both this clinical role, but also go really hard on this research side of things? Because I feel like it's a hard choice to make, especially when you're a clinician full time.
I was looking at you.
That one evolved, and so I probably from the accent you picked up, I didn't get born here. So the transition from South Africa here took a few years, but at that time I was going PhD, intensive care, pediatric anesthesia, which do I do in South Africa, and then ended up coming here. So 5 years got consumed, but the PhD idea was there. And by the time I'd settled in Australia, I thought, okay, I do want to do a PhD, and I was doing some research at the same time. And so it became a fairly obvious point about, well, what about making that into the PhD? And it was early enough in the project that worked out there. So I had been thinking, been germinating for a while, but your life circumstances often determine that that's the right time. And sometimes you don't necessarily have a choice.
I don't remember when I made the decision, because to me it was always like something I want to do. It was really clear. That's why probably I ended doing the PhD at the same time as my training, because I think for me it was critical to be certain I wanted to not just learn clinical skills, but research skills, because I thought that's a tool a skill that you need to have to be a good clinician anyway. You have to search the literature, interpret the results, implementing them in your practice. So that's not even a choice, right? And then you evolve to, do I have opportunities to then become actually a researcher, as a part-time researcher? That's different, because that's, as you mentioned this morning, that being lucky, have the opportunity, the right people around. But to be interested in research and upskill yourself with research skills, that's essential to become a full clinician and do your practice as your best. So I don't have a point where I actively decided, because it was genuinely my interest from the beginning.
I think it's with discrimination, nature, and nurture. Both my parents are chemists, and so I had a very sciencey background. And they're not medical, they're both biochemists. And also the department where I trained in South Australia, that was very academic, and nephrology is just one of those specialties that's got a very academic bent towards it, and at the time it was very much pushed by the department, the expectation was. And also in terms of job opportunities, just from a purely practical perspective, you had to have a higher degree in order to be eligible for a consultant position at a tertiary hospital. So after a while, it became also something that I wanted to do and something that I very much enjoyed, but it was out of necessity primarily.
I guess that after the time of my clinical training in neurology, probably, as Natasha was mentioning, probably that was the key point to me, as I had the chance to train in a very research-heavy department, and I said, "Oh, it's cool. I can make a difference with younger for the community. And I think that desire started there. Like I want to do what these guys are doing. I didn't know how, I had no idea, but still I don't have any idea. Sorry, but that desire was always there. That was, I would say, the turning point. And yeah, and then it's just finding the place.
Another question up here, and then there's one online.
I was wondering how you got your first sort of clinical experience and training, and especially if you didn't have it as part of your first degree, like how you go about getting that experience.
So the question is if it wasn't part of yours, like you did a non
Yes, either if it was
non-medical
part of your
degree, is that
degree, your first degree that included clinical experience, and if it didn't, then to be fair, it goes the same for research experience. If your first degree was more clinical based, how did you go about getting that research experience, or vice versa?
And before jumping in and making a commitment to it,
Yeah.
how did you get the toe in the water, the taste, and how did you convince yourself that that's what you wanted to do?
Patients didn't make good. Actually, so
Well, I think I better feel identified with you.
it's one of the things that the three of you noted in various ways was either I wanted to do this for ages, or I was embedded in a department that encouraged it. And one of the background points, I think I stand out in that I'm in a procedural specialty. So if you look at, I don't know if that's something, but it's just what it looks like. If you look at surgeons and anesthetists and other procedural specialties versus physician medical specialties, I think there's a disproportionate, not the physician specialties are more and that's certainly my Australian experience and my South African experience. And so depending on what interests you and what gets you going in the clinical world, you're going to find different paths. My wife is a clinical academic as well in hematology, and she's had a very different process. So coming to your question, the environment you find yourself in is going to heavily guide you. If you've got an awesome set of mentors, if you bump into Liz or Nick earlier on in their careers and go, fantastic, PhD supervisor. But if you end up in surgery and anesthesia, I had to find an orthopedic surgeon because there were no pediatric assistants in the entire country that I could find to supervise PhD. So your specialty will determine that quite heavily. And I think within specialties, you get very different training from nothing to environment and things.
I think it's maybe because of my relation with my colleagues who have been go to the same research I went from a non-medical background degree. I think that's a really interesting question because some of them still are wondering about how actually their results have an impact on the patients, and I feel fascinated by their genuine interest in. I'm contributing to this. For us, it's easy because then you take it to the clinic, you see the results, it's rewarding. All the hours that you spend, you see the impact. For them, it is like a very unspecific rewarding that they just heard as a second one. Just gonna comment something that we experience in our national clinical trial that is very interesting. As a clinician, we may think that people who have not that much experience with the clinical practice, it is research, right? It's very research rate. I admire so much the ability of these researchers to understand the clinic and empathize and connect with the patients without having any clinical background. What I'm trying to say with this is like, I feel if you come from a degree where you don't have clinical exposure, even if you want to be a molecular scientist, to be, in vivo research, whatever you want, basic science research, to give you the opportunity to see a hospital. I sometimes take my colleagues to a hospital and show them around, and that's like an amazing motivation for them. And I'm surprised that I understand as well. I'm just trying to say, if you come from a non-medical background, degree at the university, make sure you have clinical experience because then your motivation will be exponentially accelerated forever. Because that's what I experienced with my colleagues.
So I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm doing full-time clinical work at the moment. I've always been interested in research and at some point want to go back to do a PhD. I think what's holding me back at the moment is financial security in this economy. So clinical work can be pretty lucrative, especially if you're working in private practice. And it just really scares me, the idea of going back to be a student. So any tips in navigating that?
Really, that's a. I think that's a challenging one. Look, how I did it. You just take. I'm not suggesting that this is the way to go. You just take as much as you can. I mean, you need the clinical work. And on the top of the clinical work, I was doing my PhD. Reality is a sacrifice, and it's challenging to get that keep things rolling. And then once that you get a bit more of momentum and traction, is when you can start to say, okay, I can leave this behind. I'm getting stronger. I can start to apply some grants that are going to allow me to be more sustainable. But to start to getting that momentum, unfortunately, I cannot find an easier way rather than trying to do as much as we can.
Natasha, you would have seen a few people go through.
Great. There's no fiscal sense to do a PhD, and stipends are difficult to come by and nowhere near adequate. And as a postdoc in the US, I was earning $40,000 per annum, and we blew through all of our savings in the time that we were there. So you do it because you love it and you want to do it in the hope that, in the end, it helped me get a consultant job in a tertiary hospital, which is basically what I was always aiming for. I agree, it's not easy.
Adjusted for procedural specialists is seriously tricky. It is because there's you can multitask to some extent in some specialties, but when you're a surgeon and you're actually busy with stuff, there's only one thing to do. So there's a difference in some of the aspects, but the procedural specialties are unfortunately easier places to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that because of remuneration and because of the defined nature of the work. So as an anaesthetist, I can go and do a specific day of work and I have none of the long-term responsibilities that I have as the patients. So I can modularize my life, and that's functionally what I did. So again, it's coming back to that environment that you end up in. If you're close, I don't know what else you think, but if you're close to potentially getting a ticket, being able to work as a clinician, even in the private sector, I would say spend a year or two and just get moving and get some sort of establishment whilst you do the planning for your PhD, and then figure out a way to make it part-time. And if you can chat your way into a private practice session, but if Nicholas mentioned that he used private practice income in order to facilitate his research life in his MBA. So those are some of the tricks, but I don't know how you would do it much further. Like that online question.
This one is So I'm an international medical graduate now doing a PhD in medical education. I'm very disappointed in realizing that there are very limited grants in medical education. And I guess this is a worldwide problem. Any suggestions how I should seek out grants?
Getting around the hard full stop. Funding line is terrible, regardless of whatever that you're in. I think there's with the MRFF, there's certainly been significant expansion in terms of the breadth of the government's going to fund. But you look everywhere and anywhere, and the university website can be very useful in pointing you towards funding availability, collaborating internationally. Can be quite useful. There's definite coordinated opportunities. Collaboration doesn't really hard. Going internationally is difficult unless you've got active collaborators on site. So for an Australian researcher to kind of break into NIH funding is very difficult, and you're actually their part-time and faculty. Collaboration. It's hard around.
One of my area that the translational Chris's area, translational research has come into its own, and there's support for that. And I don't know whether educational and translational initiatives would layer over each other a little bit. You know, I've got no experience in grants of that type, but it might be an area that have a look at. Yeah, that's a terrific point. Maybe change that. Implementation science work, which is the best in the business talk about before that's very skill.
I think in our research, in terms of ground and how the social and intervention into the medication is covered from funding perspective is making research ideas. And actually, it works really well as a grant application. No? You're saying you're trying to prove something and you link that with an educational intervention that you can measure to actually translate your more basic science into the clinic. No? So I will advise, because it works in our case, to try to mesh with a group who's doing something that maybe is a little bit more attractive from basic science point of view, but that actually is seeking for a or that translational arm, which could be the education as an intervention. It's maybe trying to conjoin basic science, translational science.
Chris mentioned audit of feedback. That's a formal label for a type of clinical education. Reflecting on the rest of the practice. And to behave, to change behavior. Certainly. Yeah.
I'm just thinking we've had 3 deans here today. We've had 3 deans of medical schools here today. And I'm just wondering, really, if you're interested in evidence-based medical education, are there opportunities for medical schools to be offering some sort of sponsorship for PhDs in medical education? It's a really, really key issue, I think.
Yeah, great. That's a great suggestion. What we're hearing is there's a gap.
My question is like, when you were planning for your PhD, how prospectively you think about the project, like in terms of innovation? Like, would you prefer to be more innovative or trying to be in the traditional way? Like, as for example, if I'm saying that if you are trying to integrate data science in your research or your new project, like how long or how innovative you would like to be there?
How did you, cautious should you be in picking a project? I had a set of ideas when I chose it, and I supported it along the way. That's very different from working in an established group, getting relationships there, and someone senior to you saying, look, this is a good project, good fit. So it depends on your local setup. If you're in my position was I had a snippet that I wanted to go into with various monitoring techniques, various clinical situations, paediatrics, and so I took a series of little risks in that space. But the problem with taking risks is the timelines. You might have a great idea, but if that idea is going to take a decade to germinate, because resources you can't make it work faster than that, you're going to have a real problem with PhD. And that's where really good supervision fine-tuning the idea comes in. So you're balancing the idea. So just you were layering it through, obviously had a problem that you wanted to solve, and you really know that question. And once that advanced, what going into a lab, we take on that question, and the next bit, that's your PhD, and someone else will pick up after that. In the sliding doors world, I wish I had the other way around, because it was so stressful getting something de novo off the ground. But I think if someone had just spoon-fed it to me, the motivation to do it whilst I had 3 kids and a full-time job would have gone evaporated. So, yeah, your own motivation, obviously, with that.
remember PhD is training to do other things and learning those skills and developing a skill set that you can then apply. Some of the things that I wanted to do in my PhD is stuff that I thought about. I'm only getting to now because you need that interval of training to be able to develop those skills. Yeah, wet lab experience, bioinformatics, and some kind of homogenization of the two. This time. No. This is like sometimes just pure hard slog. And look, as been said many times today, there's a fair amount of luck involved, and I think you need to think very carefully. You want to be able to finish on time. You want some publications to kind of leverage the time that you spent in your PhD to then go on to the next thing. You need to have, Justin was saying, achievable goals as well, so you could have different components of a story, some of which are very kind of low-lying fruit versus something that, if it crashes and burns, then the whole, the last 3 years of your life hasn't gone away. So just be very, I would say still think carefully. And the onus is also not completely on you. The onus is on the supervisor, really, who's got that breadth of experience to design a project that is going to work on some level, because the negative impact on your ego as well as mental health of just getting negative results. And I do know people who had completely negative PhDs, and it tends people off from whatever they're doing with Facebook.
A couple of cautionary answers from those.
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. Oh, sorry. I'm happy to comment. I was lucky. I got actually 3 or 4 supervisors. They were probably like, what are we going to do with this one? And that was key, actually. Looking backwards, I had a lot of raw ideas, like how I would change the world, but probably I wouldn't have been able to finish a PhD properly. And some of them, they were very, and as Natasha mentioned, very already experienced supervisors, that they were very structured about, okay, look, it can be a beautiful idea about how you're going to make this as a feasible project. At the same time, there was kind of a bit of a mix between very experienced and a bit more young supervisors, which was a bit of a mix of the top level picture that you need from time to time, and also someone that is able to catch up with you every week or every fortnight, or someone that is able to guide you when you are in a bit of trouble. And as Natasha mentioned, there's a few things that you need to learn on the way. I hate the stats. I do hide them with all my guts. You need to know about them. Otherwise, if you're interpreting something that's true or if someone is, I'm going to say, crap. So definitely.
I think to me, when you are making the decision of when you're starting your PhD, that make an impact in what is more relevant. For me, I started very early in my career. I didn't know even questions. I have a lot of questions, as Carlos mentioned, but I wasn't sure if any of them were feasible or anything. So I just tried to
change the world,
or
stick with it.
Well, at that stage, when I was a registrar, I was changing the world and many things that I can. What I'm trying to say, going to the short answer, is if it's young in your career, choose a really good supervisor and then try to trust in that person and to guide you. If it's later on, obviously, then you have the skills enough to assess feasibility, length, and actually if it's impactful or not. So that's depending when it fits in.
If you want to change the world, just make sure you got supervisor.
Yes. That's the answer.
Next question here, and then one online.
So, being a clinician-scientist, you have to choose which specialty you'd like to pursue, and also which kind of interests, like in research projects, that would like to also pursue. So, how did you land that? What factors were in your mind?
So, how did you end up in the career path where you?
I guess that, as mentioned before, I wanted to actually, I'm a neurologist, but I was very interested since the beginning to be a stroke neurologist. And I put all my effort in my career to specialize in that's niche in a small area. So I guess that the research questions, if that's your comment, it's starting to come as you need to have a very solid clinical platform. And that's what I would like to say. Otherwise, you're very like, how do you know if that's I always found how I'm gonna know if that's a relevant question if I don't have enough experience as a clinician, I haven't read enough. And I guess that if I had any good question, they came from the frustration from the clinical practice and from the limitations of I'm unable, I'm failing here, there is a space here, there is a need. And then you talk to your colleagues, and after 3 or 4 telling you, yeah, seems to be something there, you start to think about the research.
Especially all stuff like marriage or research. Is there anybody who's not doing that? You're doing researching something that you're not seeing on a day-to-day basis. I really like the clinician stuff, and I've reached a point in my career where if someone says, there's a week of particular research, I'd probably say no, because I want to keep the clinical expertise that I have done. Whatever other pediatric anesthesia, cardiac anesthesia, you've got to do it enough to stay senior. But it gives you the ability to spot errors in research plans. You hear full-time researchers on a conference call and they say, what about this? And you go and say, you actually do that, it doesn't work. Or it does work. So I guess at some point you end up making a decision. You at varying points say, I'm spending a lot of time on research or I'm a clinician.
Hi, my name's Ray. I'm one of the final year medical student. I just have a question about publication. So I'm trying to publish my very first manuscript. Yay! But I've been rejected a few times. They're like, oh, we get like a few hundred papers every year. We can only publish so many. It's kind of saying, oh, we're too good for you. So is there any way to find the right journal for to publish?
It's weird. Everyone will remember their first paper, right? And the first responses.
The current paper.
Or the email from last week.
that never ends.
From where you are now, looking back to when you were trying to publish your early papers, what advice would you give yourself?
Be kind to yourself. Like, don't get a rejection as your work is not good enough, you are not worth it doing anything. It's just that doesn't fit the moment or it's not the right time for them. That's it. Don't take it as it's question the value of what you have spent so many hours on, and just try again.
No, you just keep trying, and ostensibly, yeah, even though it does to some degree matter where it gets published in terms of metrics and citations and the next round and so on. Your first step, you just want it to be published. There's many seminal papers that have been published in now defunct journals that also couldn't get published, and it is a matter of time and right place at the right time. And we know that the review process is deeply flawed, and it's a bit of who you know, not what you know as well. So it's not objectively fair. So don't be disheartened by a multitude of rejections, even though your ego takes a hit every time.
What would the number one piece of advice you'd give to us today, which are mostly fairly early in our journey as clinician scientists or thinking?
Okay, that's a good kind of rounding up question. Number one piece of advice to
A lot of the challenge made me question and have a bit of an imposter syndrome. Like, I am a doctor, I am a clinician, but I'm doing this research with all these clever people. Believe in yourself, it is possible. You will find people in your journey that will say, oh, this is too much. As a clinician, you have enough. No, you can do it. And there are people there that do it and have a really balanced life. So it is possible. And I'm sure we will be more in the future because it's how we will do it.
So that's a really fascinating insight. Sometimes you perceive by clinicians as not a real clinician. Before, sometimes you perceive
Not a real researcher by the researcher, being appetite. Right. Yeah. You're a special breed. Right?
It's always from every perspective, from trying to get something published to trying to get funding to maintain a lab and to recruit students. You know, once you're in that position, and if you really enjoy it enough, as I do, despite all of the negative hits you get, you just keep going.
Keep going. You're a rare breed. You will find a few more on the way, and things I don't know how at the end up they end up working, and you find your place. I would like to be able to put it better, but just keep going. Believe in yourself.
Fantastic. I think you've heard from four individual journeys, which have all been really some barriers and some of the struggles, but also the joys and the success of being a scientist. Heard how they've integrated their careers. Thank you very much.